national conference. It's the longest running national conference of any political party from Australia's oldest political party. What I hope to see in the coming days is energetic, enthusiastic debate. The best thing that the Labor Party has are its members and supporters. And I believe we'll see the energy and the passion on display. And I also think what is the least estimated but perhaps most valuable proposition that Labor presents to the Australian people at the federal election within the next 5 months. It's a united team, it's an energetic team, and it's a team with vision. So we're very much looking forward to our visit to South Australia and hearing all of the very important issues that South Australians think are important to the future of this great state. Penny and I haven't taken any questions on any matters.
Keep it in the ground. 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 What's that?
I'm assuming you've asked about the Prime Minister's question on Jerusalem. I don't know if you can hear the answer over our friends. But I believe that Mr Morrison's decision today is a humiliating backdown. What has happened is...
stopping the Adani coal mine.
Can't hear it.
Queensland is on fire. We cannot afford to burn this coal. Our planet can't afford to burn this coal.
All right, I appreciate your point. I'm happy to talk to you. But if you've made your point, which is fine, and I welcome that. And now we're going to talk about some other issues, because there are some other issues which are important to the Australian people. Happy to talk to you after this. If you don't respect the offer of a conversation, if you don't respect the idea that there's other issues important for progressive politics in Australia, I can't stop you, but that would be a bit of a shame, and it might indeed undermine the important message you're making.
We'd love to chat with you, Mr.
All right,
Shorten.
well, we'll do that.
The biggest issue for our generation
All right, good.
is climate change. We want your party to be a leader on climate change.
All right.
We need a commitment before the election, Mr. Shorten. We hope your party can deliver that.
No, it's all right. Listen, we live in a free country. They made their point, and it really doesn't worry me that much. Okay, going back to the question of Jerusalem, we are having an argument about something that most Australians didn't realise was a problem. It's been a humiliating backdown by Mr Morrison. I'm not sure when he rushed the announcement of moving the embassy that he really knew what he was doing. I'm tempted to think it was a sort of a rookie mistake by an ill-paid Prime Minister. But it's a little more serious than that. My fear is that Mr Morrison hasn't just had to do a political backdown. My fear is that he's made Australia look stupid on the international stage. Conflict in the Middle East is a complex issue. People have been trying to resolve it for decades, and there are very strongly held views on both sides. Rushing in and making a premature announcement about Middle Eastern foreign policy just to sort out a domestic political by-election at Wentworth, I feel was risky and foolish. What I'm worried is that Mr Morrison put his political interest ahead of our national interest. So I regret that we've seen a complex debate derailed by reckless and foolish behaviour. Australian government foreign policy on the Middle East can't afford to be dictated by short-term polling considerations in Australia.
Will the backdown, as you call it, save the trade deal with Indonesia?
I sincerely hope the trade deal with Indonesia occurs. It's not just me saying it as the opposition leader, but everyone from Indonesia to local business in Australia have all expressed concern that this decision was a very rushed decision.
Do you think that there have been concerns raised about the decision of Labor to progress?
Well, Australia should always make its foreign policy fear of threats from other people around the world. You know, I respect the right of Australia to have an independent foreign policy, but I do really think it's been a foolish and risky bungle by the government, because what they've done is they didn't consult the ADF, they didn't consult our security experts, they didn't have a proper cabinet process, and now, as everyone's predicted, the government's walked away from their initial rush of blood to the head. It really was a rookie mistake which has had repercussions for our relations in the region. I might get Penny Wong, our Shadow Foreign Affairs spokesperson, to talk further about this reckless and foolish behaviour.
Look, I just want to make a few comments because I think Bill's covered it. This is a decision which is all risk and no gain. Humiliating back down that puts Australia in the position of just a handful of countries like I think Russia and the Czech Republic. A humiliating back down, but continues to present risks to Australia's relationships in the world and with the region. And for what? Let's be very clear about why this decision has been made. This is Scott Morrison trying to dig himself out of a hole of his own making. That's what this is about, and that is not how you run foreign policy. You don't put your domestic political interests above Australia's national interest, and that is what this government has done. No, I think he's just, as I said, digging himself out of a hole he put himself into. But the sadness is, it's the country's national interest which has been compromised. Well, look, we are a responsible party of government, and I think Bill answered that correctly. Now, we're not going to speculate about those sorts of issues. Government should always ensure they keep Australians safe. We are entitled as a nation to make our foreign policy according to our national interests. So our criticism of Mr Morrison is that he has not made this decision, nor the decision in Wentworth, in the national interest. He's made it in Scott's interest, and that's not how you should run foreign policy.
If we could ask the Labor leader, Bill Shorten, a question today on franking credits policy. Now, you're here today with the candidate to boost the Nadia Farncy. There's a research out today suggesting that more older voters are actually really concerned about that franking credit policy. Is it a danger to you in elections to have a higher population of seniors, which is going to be the case quite a lot in South Australia?
Labor is the party of the fair go for all Australians. It is neither sustainable nor fair for some people to get an income tax refund when they paid no income tax. That's at the heart of our policy. When the government pays a payment for owning shares and getting dividends, that was to compensate for income tax that's paid by the person who owns the shares. But these days what we're seeing is people are getting income tax refunds when they pay no income tax. It's not illegal, but it's not sustainable, and it certainly isn't fair. And when we talk about older Australians, what worries me is the fact that there's 120,000 people waiting for aged care packages. What worries me is that there's 420,000 of our fellow Australians who've been diagnosed with a dementia, and we don't have enough funding in our aged care system to support them. What worries me is that we've seen the out-of-pocket costs for going to see a GP go up and up. We've seen the out-of-pocket costs to go and see specialists go up and up. What I'm seeing is that older Australians are disproportionately on the receiving end of the brunt of Mr Morrison's healthcare cuts, and I want to find money in the budget to make sure that all Australians are guaranteed quality healthcare no matter how old they are. On Jerusalem.
If you are elected, will you reverse this decision?
Well, first of all, on the Jerusalem question, let's say what really happened. Mr Morrison has tried to copy Donald Trump, and he's failed to even do that. Labor's position is the view of the sensible world opinion and the best advice within Australian foreign policy. What we believe is that Jerusalem should be recognised as the capital of both Israel and Palestine as part of the final stages of a negotiated two-state peace deal between Palestine and Israel. And the problem that Mr Morrison's done is we keep trying to reverse engineer to cover up for his initial mistake. He shouldn't have said he was going to move the embassy like Donald Trump has done. Mr Morrison, we're not America. Mr Morrison shouldn't have done that. And ever since then, everything that he's said since has been to cover up for his initial mistake. What Mr Morrison's doing is confusing stubbornness with leadership. What he's doing is confusing his own political interests with our national interests. Well, I've just said that we will do it at the final stage, and we're not at the final stage of a two-state peace deal. Well, as Penny said, Labor is a responsible party of government. I don't believe any government puts people's lives in danger knowingly or willingly, nor should they. But I think that the Australian people, and indeed people all around the world, have said, normally Australia's pretty savvy on foreign policy. We might be a middle power, we're not a great power, but we've got a good reputation globally for making the right calls, for pulling our weight globally.